Anthony Wood will add a little bit of perspective as to what's actually going to happen right now, and he always does. I think the one thing I mentioned to Ryan, which obviously Anthony will probably reinforce, is the Atlanta Falcons quarterback situation for sure. So,
I mean, looking at Schaub's numbers, I understand he had his falling out at first time through Atlanta, but he's not necessarily a terrible quarterback. I mean, there's worse options you have to back up. I mean, we can use Miami as an example, but I think most of the early inception of this show has been kind of just trashing what's going on with them over there. So I think they'd be worse, without Matt Ryan than having Matt Schaub in there. So right. I don't. Again, it's not the worst thing in the world, but for a team that's already had such a terrible season, this is really like one of the least terrible things to happen to them as far as a backup quarterback of that caliber playing goes. So well,
he's familiar with everything that goes on in Atlanta for sure. So the familiarity factor, and nowadays with you being brought up with the NFL versus when I was, you really depended on the one quarterback.
Absolutely.
Nowadays, you have to really depend on two. With that said, Anthony Wood is on the program, so we'll let Anthony go ahead and take over some of the things that we have. Anthony, welcome back to the Sports Exchange. Appreciate you being on, buddy.
Yes, hello there, gents. How are you doing?
How's it going, Anthony?
Okay, gent. My UK. I'm getting ready for my trip to Jacksonville.
How's things going?
Oh, all right. I get ready for my trip to Jacksonville, so I'll let you lead off with the obvious point about what we should be seeing up in Jacksonville, UK.
Yes, let's be honest. It's an interesting situation going on. We've got Gardner Minshew, who's obviously been 10 touchdowns, 2 interceptions over his 7 games so far this season, and he's looked fantastic as a rookie.
Yeah.
And beyond, I think, what we'd expected at this point in time.
Yeah, he really does. I guess it's going to present that unique debate when the time comes that Foles is eligible to come back. That's for sure.
Certainly. Foles has returned to training this week. Obviously, he did start their very first game, but he was out after about, I think, 2 snaps in total. So Minshew has been their starter all season, essentially, and he has really gotten a good grip on this offense, and he's really shone so far. So the big question coming out of Jacksonville at this point in time is, do they jump back to Foles once he is healthy, say this week or next week, or do they stick with the rookie? Do they stick with what's working now? It's a tough question because it's not like you've got a back catalogue of work of Foles in this offense in Jacksonville to look at and go, right, he's going to be able to do a better job with this offense than Minshew is, because we don't really know what to expect from Foles in this offense. So personally, I think my opinion is stick with Minshew, but he'll be on a very short leash, and then should anything go wrong, Foles will step in. But how do you guys feel about this?
Well, you know what? You just said a mouthful there, Anthony. He could be on a short leash. I think part of it's going to be attributed to the record, too. I mean, I think that if the Jaguars play to their capabilities and they even this thing at 4-4, and, of course, you got to also take into consideration you have 1 or 2 games, and then you're leading into the London game, and then you have a bye after that. When do you incorporate Nick Foles into the equation, knowing you have the bye as well? So I think there's some interesting dynamics. I'll have more clarity on it over the weekend. Lewis, what did you want to add to that?
I was thinking, and I don't know if teams do this, but we see that rosters carry 2 quarterbacks, but maybe they think about instituting a 2-quarterback system. We know Foles and kind of conveys this sort of clutch gene. He kind of has it in him. We saw it that first go around in Philadelphia, and then when Wentz was injured, he was big into leading them to that Super Bowl. So I mean, could we see a scenario where, say, Jacksonville is struggling maybe in the third quarter, and then you bring Nick Foles in? I mean, I know what Anthony said, he's on a short leash, but could we see that to where Foles comes in later in a game, maybe helps them get close to at least winning, or maybe even win a game in the second half, and they run a system that way? Or do you just see it as Foles or Minshew has one mess up and they're going back to Foles?
That's a fair question. Let me answer this first, okay, UK, then you can go ahead and implement. The only time I've ever seen a 2-quarterback system involved is when you have a guy who's a very mobile quarterback and you're trying to throw the defense off.
Exactly.
Otherwise, I don't see it with 2 pocket passers. I just don't.
But I will quip with the fact that Minshew is shown to be a pretty good runner. I mean, I'm looking at it right here. He's had a few games where, he's broken away for a little bit. I mean, he's not – I'm not going to say he's Lamar Jackson, but, again, he's adequate enough to where he can, scramble for a few yards for you on his feet.
But you just said it. runner to scramble to extend the pocket and extend the play is one thing than being an actual runner to know that you can actually tucking the ball in like a running back and then going for making the big plays as we've seen. That's a different story. But I do understand your point, and both of you guys are dead accurate in terms of the short leash. Knowing the way the Jaguars operate like I do, I think, and this is just speculation on my part, I'll have an idea what's going on over the weekend, over the next 2 weeks, that I think that they really would like to bring Foles back in around week 11 or 12 and let this Minshew thing play out as long as they can. And if they see the reason to switch, that's when you make the switch. Let me use an analogy, and you guys will understand where I'm coming from. I don't know about you, UK, I don't know if you are, but with the Rocky film, okay, I remember when Mickey, his trainer, told him, he used to be a left-handed fighter, use right and then switch back. You see where the analogy, that's when you have to know when to go back if the situation presents itself to keep everybody off guard. You know the analogy, and do you understand it too?
I mean, I would have used Paul McCartney being a lefty playing a right-handed guitar.
You're a music guy. That's different.
But I agree with what you're saying. I agree with the sentiment that you're putting forth. I understand where you're coming from. So, kind of use what works, and then you can always go back to another thing that works.
Right. What are you thinking now, Anthony? Because you and I had some fun over the summer talking about sports movies. This is an opportunity to slip one in.
Absolutely. It's a tough one. I understand entirely where you're coming from, but at this point in time, and you were right on it there just now. You mentioned obviously that the only way this can really work with the 2 QB system or anything like that is if they have 2 very different skill sets, and I don't see that between these 2 QBs, and that's the big problem for me. The best example I can think of today would be look at New Orleans when they throw Taysom Hill in the offense with, say, Drew Brees. 2 very different quarterbacks, both QBs, but with very different skill sets. Hill's more mobile, more physical, he's a better runner, blah, blah, blah. You don't necessarily get that with Minshew and Foles, and that's the problem for me. So I maintain he's going to be on a short leash, but I would stick with the hot hand. I would stick with Minshew.
Yeah, I think so for the time being. You really do.
And I'm going to add something on that. We talk about the clutch gene that I briefly delved into with Foles, but also know this, that Minshew already has 2 game-winning drives this year. And I think that if anything, again, ride the hot hand, but he's shown that he can do it in big moments. And look, I'll throw another note out there. His completion percentage the last 2 weeks is 47%. That's not great. We tend to think league average is about 60. So, should he have another game like this and Foles continues to progress, I would not be shocked if in, maybe week 10 or whenever he returns, they go back to him as starter. But if they continue to win, I think they'll just continue to ride it as long as possible.
Yeah, I mean, that to me makes the most sense. I really do. And you know what? The one thing that all 3 of us are overlooking is Tom Coughlin and Doug Marrone know this is a great problem to have. It really is. Look at all these teams around here that are struggling to find a quarterback, and you've got 2 good ones and a guy who's a late-round pick who's actually performing ahead of schedule. But they knew when I was at the draft, this guy was their quarterback of the future, and they didn't have to break the bank to get him early in the draft.
Mm-hmm. And they could kind of continue to use him the way that I guess the Packers did with Rodgers when he was taken in 2005, where it took him 4 seasons to start. We had to wait for Brett Favre to retire for the 36th time before,
Right, that was good.
He came back out. And we saw at the beginning, I believe Rodgers' first season as a starter was like 6-10. And, you could chalk up Minshew's early struggles, that week 6 game against New Orleans where, he keeps the offense, only gets the offense 6 points and he's completing 48% of the passes. We could kind of make a comparison in that regard and just further note that, keep him there while Foles runs the course of that contract. And if Foles continues to struggle when he returns, say he comes back and he's not, playing well, then who you have in Minshew and somebody who's already shown that he can perform at a high level in the NFL.
Well, knowing Minshew the way that I do know him, okay, this is not a guy who you're going to damage his confidence, unlike a lot of the fragile psyche that you do with a lot of quarterbacks. You really don't. So I don't think you're going to have that problem here like you would in most cases. Oh, you're going to wreck that? No. Gardner's a cool customer is what he is. So however the outcome is, he understands it. But this guy's getting such valuable experience. It's ridiculous. And he's the type of guy who's such an old-fashioned country boy that he doesn't mind learning from Nick Foles. And when you have a good quarterback room like you have with these guys, then there's a lot of good cohesiveness there in order to make sure that there are no issues whatsoever in the room. So I think it's a good problem to have. All right, so let's go on to another quarterback situation, Anthony. We're talking about Bridgewater or Breeze. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mentioned the Breeze situation earlier on with Taysom Hill, but obviously Bridgewater's the highest paid backup in the NFL. He's had 5 wins at the start of this season, obviously in relief of Drew Brees, who's been suffering with a thumb injury. His only loss, Bridgewater's only loss came as a relief for Brees against LA. He's had 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions so far this season, but he's had a very good record, and what's been impressive is that he's shown a command over this offense. His experience in the NFL may be limited, but it is there. He has experience from the past, and he's shown it. He's kept a cool head. He's gotten on very well with both Jared Cook and Michael Thomas. He's really gotten the best out of them. So it's a tough situation. I mean, 5 straight wins with him as a starter. Suddenly to pull him, don't get me wrong, Drew Brees is one of the best of all time, in my opinion, but it's certainly not going to be easy to pull someone like that who's on such a hot streak, because Drew Brees has returned and he believes he's ready this week. So do they rush Brees back in, or do they perhaps give Teddy another week or two and perhaps wait until the bye?
This is the first time in many years that I have seen 2 situations where the backup quarterbacks have played pretty well, bringing the incumbent in.
3. Kyle Allen.
Right. Okay, Kyle Allen. Okay, thanks for bringing that up. Although I think Kyle Allen has a little more staying power than the other 2. But we'll get to that in a moment, so thanks for bringing that up. But this is a good problem for these coaches to have. It really is. I mean, the future, at least is good in Jacksonville. Teddy Bridgewater is going to be a starter someplace in 2020, and Kyle Allen's going to be a starter with the Carolina Panthers down the road. As you brought it up, that's a good problem to have, and I think that at some point or another, Cam Newton can be a salary cap casualty down the road. We'll see how that plays out. But I don't know, if it were me, and again, I don't get paid the big bucks to do this, I would go with Bridgewater at least another week is what I would do, and then give Brees a chance to fully heal. That's me. What do you think, Lewis?
I could honestly see, I mean, they're playing Arizona, so you're going to have 2 quarterbacks who are going to try to get it done multiple ways. Murray and Bridgewater both like to use the legs, although as we've seen Bridgewater kind of grow into the league a little bit more, given that this is, I believe, his 6th season in the NFL, if I'm not mistaken, or his 5th. He's kind of slowed down on the running a little bit, whereas Kyler Murray is still kind of a fresh fruit, so he's very much trying to, show what he can do and put himself on display. But I can see if they struggle, and if Brees is healthy, and if, Sean Payton believes that, then, again, I wouldn't be shocked if he's back in that game in the 3rd quarter and he's taken over, and then we just... the narrative shifts toward Teddy Bridgewater. He was good for 5 weeks, and he'll probably continue to be good, and I'm sure he'll have a starting job next year, but it's going to be Drew Brees' team all over again.
Oh, without a doubt. But again, you're talking the Arizona Cardinals, so...
Who have played well the last 3 weeks. I understand they haven't played, uber competitive teams, but at the same time, it's still the NFL, and they're winning those games, and that's good for Kyler Murray to get under his belt.
Well, it is, but you're talking about a team that yields a lot of points and a lot of yards. So, but yeah, I mean, hey, listen, the Cardinals... didn't win many games last year, and they're already showing promise already. So with that said, let's talk about, obviously, Patrick Mahomes being back, ASAP, risk injury. We'll let you lead off with this one, Anthony, then Lewis and I will chime in. Go ahead.
Yes, Mahomes has started training once again. He will not play this week, and also probably not next week either, but there's talk of will he return the week after that. It's a lot sooner than they'd expected, and that's certainly good from their point of view that he's getting back so much sooner than they thought, because let's be honest, initially they were really concerned about how serious that injury was. So the question is, do they rush him back? Do they bring him back maybe next week? Do they push him a little bit? Because he wants to play, he wants to train, he wants to be back on the field. But obviously with a serious injury like this, rushing him back might be a mistake. So again, this is merely an opinion based, but for me, I'd say give him another week or two. Make sure that he's fully healthy first. Don't risk it. Because we've seen what he's done earlier in the season when he went down with that ankle issue. They pushed him back in again, and he struggled again week on week with that ankle issue because he didn't get time to recover. I would give him an extra week or so at least, just to make sure he is back where he needs to be, both in terms of his ankle and his knee.
Yeah, Matt Moore is a very capable backup. He's proven to be in the league for a lot of years, and some guys that are quarterbacks that are backups stay around a long time. So I think that the Kansas City Chiefs are in good hands with him. But more importantly, what the Chiefs have to do is they have to get some kind of a running game going, and I'm not so sure that Andy Reid is the type of guy that wants to utilize the run as much as he's capable of doing, and he should get money out of LaShawn McCoy, but he's not doing it. So I don't know.